Welcome to How We Made That App. I'm your host, Madhukar Kumar. I started off my career as a developer, eventually got into product management, and then finally into product marketing. Today, I am the CMO at a company called SingleStore, which is a unified platform for all modern and AI applications. In our show today, we have our guest, Marc Locchi, who's the CTO and co founder of a company called FLOWD. FLOWD is a really interesting application and a company based out of Australia. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation about how we built that app or how Mark built that app. So, welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, thank you, Madhukar. I'm looking forward to the chat with you.
So, for our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you start your journey as a developer, as a builder, as a creator? And then I'd also love to learn more about the company itself for our audience. What does it do? Who does it serve?
Look, from a personal end, I guess I've been a frustrated programmer all my life. In many past roles that I've had in sales and marketing positions for IT companies, I would spend a lot of time automating tools at the start of the job to ensure that I could be effective in doing the job that I was hired to do, as opposed to spend the time trying to figure out where the problems were in the business to go then solve. So I've been a frustrated programmer for a number of years, and about 15, 16 years ago, my family and I were living in Singapore, looking after Asia Pacific for some of the tier one companies such as IBM or Lenovo, and we moved back to Australia, and at that time I did a bit of a sea change, which was, went off and learned how to build scalable applications in the cloud, and ever since I've built a few, some in use within large organizations as internal tools, and some still available in the marketplace. And it was always a dream of mine personally to be able to build a solution that can make a difference in the world. And, as the old adage of leaving the world in a better state that you found it when you arrived. And FLOWD happened purely by chance, as some of these things do happen. It was a chance meeting with a fellow up here in a place called Noosa in Australia, who manages the largest property management company called Aspire Property Management, used by many local and overseas visitors for holiday rentals, for example. And one of the problems Aspire had was, out of the 180 plus properties they manage, they were getting regular issues with regards to large water bills appearing where it wasn't a visible leak within the property, but it turned out that there was a broken pipe somewhere under the ground and water would run continuously, and bill shock is the only way at the time it was available to go to understand there's a problem, right? It's when the bill was generated by the utility. So it was a chance meeting during the holiday, as a matter of fact, coffee discussion, and one thing leads to another. You build apps, come up and live up north with us, and let's go build this thing. And here we are, and it's been now in market for 12 months as version 2. Version 1 has been in market for about 3 years now, and managing, tier 1 brands, outlets, some McDonald's, as an example of a brand that is using version 1 of the product initially
Wow.
as the product to monitor how much water is being used and whether there are any hidden leaks in some of the McDonald's outlets, as an example.
What a fascinating story. So, if I get this right, you take the data from a bunch of sensors that are probably buried in the plumbing across different parts, and then it sends that sensor data to your application. And if there is a leak, then it basically tells you that there is a leak. And does this happen in real time, or is there some sort of a latency?
So look, the actual architecture of the solution is pretty close to what you described. There are device manufacturers in the market that make the devices that basically register the usage of the water and then provide that information to the cloud. Landis and Gear, for example, or a couple of local guys such as IOTA and Caliper here in Australia. These devices are either a device that you piggyback over the top of an existing mechanical meter, and that is essentially a device that falls into a category of a logger, or there are digital devices whereby you cut the pipe and inline the device. And that is essentially a digital meter, which essentially can pick up much more accurate sort of lower levels of water usage through the pipe. And because, and one of the questions actually, Madhukar, on this that I get whenever people ask, hey, what are you doing? And what does FLOWD do? And the funniest thing is, electricity has been done like this for a long time in Australia, smart metering, but water hasn't. And so one of the question I hear quite often is, why hasn't this been done before?
Yeah.
And the answer in many ways is the technology has taken quite some time to get to a place where it's becoming more trusted by the councils and utilities that would need to use it to manage their networks. And a prime example that I give you is those loggers or digital meters that I alluded to at the start of answering your question. Are devices that are very much reliant on battery to be able to provide the information back to the cloud on what they're logging and registering during the day. And so there's been a real concern about, because there is no electricity available, I should say, at the points where these devices typically are, which is where your water meters are, right, on the edge of your property, for example. And so there's been a real concern with regards to deploying 100,000, 1 million of these things, right, and finding out that the battery won't last the 7 to 10 years that it's claimed. So it's been a very slow adoption, as I think some of these councils and utilities have played a much more careful sort of approach to seeing how the technology evolves and becomes more reliable in just providing this long battery life capability.
So the sensors you talk about, Mark, they are still battery operated, but I'm assuming they're also latching on to either the cellular network or the data network to send that data over. And what is that mechanism? Is it MQTT or is it just straight up REST-based APIs that it sends over the packets of information?
The devices we focused on, and actually one thing I'll add to sort of give you a little bit more background about FLOWD to answer this question is, we are the only platform that looked at building a solution where we are data source agnostic, i.e. FLOWD works with all the major telcos in Australia, including Vodafone, which means FLOWD works in Europe as well. And we also made a device brand agnostic, meaning we want to provide an outcome to a utility or a council, but put the onus or the power in negotiating with the market and the suppliers of these services in the hands of the utility. And so, the devices we support today are NB-IoT devices, and they use MQTT as a protocol by which they essentially connect to the DMP, are managed by the DMPs. The DMPs, or the device management platforms, reside at the edge of the telco network. And so essentially the device will log data during the day, typically every 15-minute interval. Every 15 minutes, it will log an interval of water usage. And then once a day, it'll wake up and send the data back to their DMP. And in real time, FLOWD listens to events from those DMPs and receives that data and processes that data and triggers any alarms or thresholds that are met, that are preset by the user. So a very simple scenario to explain, and I can show some data on screens in a minute. But if you can just imagine, you've got 96 intervals being logged over a 24-hour period of water usage. And if you find that none of those 96 intervals are showing zero usage, then it would be a likelihood that there is a problem over your site. And understanding the patterns of water usage, because for many, many people, or for virtually for all people that we engage with, it's the first time they get to see how water gets used over a 24-hour period within the sites that they used to be involved in for a number of years. And typically the process is to understand that water usage and then to understand whether that water usage is okay or not, based on your use case in the case of your building. So commercial building running air conditioning 24/7, for example, for fridges or running 24/7 air conditioning because they have staff all the time, it would not be unlikely, you would expect to see water usage all the time. Versus a building that, shuts its doors at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and then doesn't open its doors again until 9 o'clock in the morning. You'd expect to see virtually no water usage, or at least intervals of no water usage during the 24-hour period. And therefore, that particular building would be a suspect for a leak sort of building. The other thing, obviously, is to understand the magnitude of the leaks. So every 15 minutes, I'm using 1,000 litres, or every 15 minutes, I'm using 40,000 litres. Well, one is likely to be a broken pipe. The other one is potentially a cracked pipe or a tap potentially being left on. Right? So the product aims to save water, but it also help people save money by not wasting water, if that makes sense.
So very fascinating, and love to see the screens in a few minutes as well. But in terms of the architecture, I get the visual picture now that the data is flowing in, pun intended,
Yep.
and then you pull that data into your application, and then you do some sort of data analytics, data wrangling, and then show it on a dashboard. And very interesting to know that you were looking at leakages, but now you're also doing usages and stuff. In terms of the actual architecture of the application, how would you describe that? Is it a front end, JavaScript,
Right.
PHP, or whatever? Is there a middle tier, and is there a database? And then do you deploy it on some sort of a hyperscaler? But just describe to our audience, what does the overall architecture look like of this entire application?
Right. Well, interesting because, the fellow that I had been following for some time in my journey of software development is a fellow called Jack Ellis from a company called Fathom Analytics. And Jack is the reason why you and I are talking today in many ways. And not only, certainly here's the reason why I made the initial contact. The reason why you and I are still talking today, or keep talking today, is because you guys as a company and as people have done a great job in working with us, right? But basically the platform is built on a Laravel PHP backend, much like Jack in Fathom Analytics. And the front end is a Vue front end, Vue 3. Front end and back end are two separate projects. So the front end works with the back end through a stack of RESTful API endpoints. And the product was essentially designed so that it can be used through APIs only or through the front end, whichever way you might want to do it in your use case, right? And so the back of the product, when we built version 1, it was built very much as a proof of concept. And as we decided to start on version 2, it was at that moment that I worked with the other partners in the business to say, we want to start how we finish. And what we wanted to achieve is to have a product that can scale massively without that concern about having a chunk of business and now wanting to tweak as you go to make sure the product can continue to perform. So we did the rounds early on to understand what kind of products are available and what kind of services are available in the marketplace from various vendors to see what would be suitable for us to work with. And one of the ones we reached out to and had a discussion with was a company called TimescaleDB, which had provided a service over a Postgres solution after interactions and exchanges with them on what we're trying to achieve in terms of data. And just to give you perspective, we're looking at a device may have up to 10 or so sensors of information that it could send through, We're talking about ranging from device-specific stuff such as signal strength and battery life through to, in the case of loggers and or digital devices, multiple sensor streams coming through. Some devices record temperature of water as well as pressure and vibration within the pipes of sound, just to give you some examples. And when you collate that kind of information across 10 million endpoints over 2 years, which is a minimum retention period a council or utility wants to see to do year-to-year comparisons on usage, you're looking at anywhere between 7 and 8 trillion rows of data. And so the way I reached out to different companies to see what kind of services and products they had available for us to work on as part of the starting point integration of design and build on version 2 was, the way I simply put it was, I got about 7 to 8 trillion rows worth of data, and I want my mother to be able to find her 96, usage intervals of water a week ago on Monday, and not have to wait 5 minutes to see that data. In other words, we want to be able to ingest large volumes of data, do some processing of that data, but at the same time provide as much as humanly possible real-time analytics to the end users. And Timescale DB, after an interaction and exchange, they came back with, we don't have a service that can support your requirement. And at that time, SingleStore wasn't so well known, certainly not to me and my readings and my team. But Jack, and so we ended up going down the path for performance. We ended up going down the path of DynamoDB because the product itself runs on Lambda. So using Lambda, we have the ability to scale, infinitely, right? If we want to sort of consider the Amazon capacity behind Lambda, as well as a whole bunch of other benefits from Amazon, like dual availability zone, et cetera, et cetera. So the product was built on Lambda. So how do we build this ability to deliver these analytics to a screen, right? And so one of the products we looked at initially and did some testing on was Dynamo. Dynamo is extremely fast. Unfortunately, we found Dynamo for our particular use case to be expensive in the way that, our particular use case has a lot of write work. That would have meant Dynamo would have been a little bit prohibitive in cost as we scale in growth. And amazingly, after doing all of that work and the wonderful people at Amazon who worked with us all the way through it, I see this email come from a fellow called Jack Ellis that says, why would each Dynamo move to SingleStore? And so I emailed Jack and I go, man, you could have sent this email 3 weeks ago. It would have saved me a lot of work. Anyway, so it was exactly at that time I reached out to SingleStore to have the same discussion that I had with some of the other service providers, and a fellow called Sarul jumped on the call. And Sarul is very senior now within SingleStore as, I think he's worldwide chief of customer success. I think he looks after ensuring that you guys, whatever you sell, gets delivered, right, to all the customers all over the world. And Sarul was amazing. Sarul put his money where his mouth is, as we like to say in Australia, and says, yes, of course we can do that. And all of a sudden, I've got another amazing fellow called Aditya jumping on calls with us and looking at our table designs and providing expertise to make sure that as we build this thing from the ground up, we've had, some people in the know really look at the work we are doing and make sure that we, implement as close to as perfect as possible, I guess, in our design from their understanding of our access patterns, right? And so it's been an amazing journey, and look, understanding that obviously that was a few years ago, and companies were a lot smaller back in the day. But to me, SingleStore as a product has been fantastic because what you guys have done in terms of providing that abstraction layer to sharding and essentially reducing complexity or managing big data is awesome in terms of the product. And for us, being a startup and running lean right throughout the development process, having you guys through the managed service become essentially our database experts within the team has given us a lot of peace of mind as we start growing the business and bringing customers' data into the product. Because, at the end of the day, that is the gold, the customer data. So we want to keep that secure and keep that available and be able to provide this service. So we're here because of Jack, but we're also here because of Sarong and Aditya and a number of other people within your company that have been amazing to work with.
That's really neat. But let's talk a little bit more about the architecture.
Sure.
In terms of choosing Laravel, is that something that you started off with, or did you land up in Laravel after trying out a few other things? And I'm assuming when you did the first version, you were using Postgres for all your
Yes.
data.
Look, the choice for Laravel is very much, in preparation for this, I watched end-to-end the Jack Ellis session that you did on how we built this app. And, I give you the same answers that Jack would give you with regards to Laravel. At the time of figuring out which horse you're going to back, right? You can back many horses, and as we say in Australia, you can become a jack of all trades but master of none. Or back a horse and become really good at it. And, the attractions around Laravel were, as a framework, it was the neatest framework, the most complete. It's a framework that I not really have found, massive sort of write-ups on issues of security and how it's been designed and built. So the vibe was very good about Laravel at its time. And, I personally got into using that. Look, I've used others. I've used Node. I've can do a little bit of Rust and Go, et cetera, et cetera. But Laravel it's just so beautifully written, and it's so beautiful to use that when you read code that you create with Laravel, it's very easy to understand, or much easier to understand than other languages. So it's very eloquent in the way it's written. So that was one of the attractions, plus the fact that there's a massive community behind it and a massive ecosystem of functionalities that are available as packages for it, right? So there was many reasons, but that was the horse that I sort of put my big effort backing behind. And that was in the days of PHP 5.6, right, where PHP was sort of left a little bit, and it made that jump to 7, skipping version 6. And as you saw that jump sort of happen by the community, we saw massive performance improvements in the code, in how it sort of operates, right? So a few things lined up to make Laravel a really good choice for me personally, and obviously for Jack, because here we are having the chat. And ultimately, the combination of that with Lambda and having Laravel run on Lambda, it's just been awesome in terms of being able to scale the product as well on the infrastructure, right?
So Laravel itself is, I'm assuming, also the API layer
Yes.
that talks to the database. And is it also the front end because it serves the pages itself? Or did you say that you're using Vue as the React framework for the actual front end?
So we're not using a web framework per se. We're using Vue, and we've structured the APIs on the back end to sort of work with the front end that we built. But basically, the front end doesn't talk directly to the database, right? The front end communicates to the back end, and the back end interacts with the database to feed the front end whatever it needs. So, so that's kind of the separation. The database, is explicitly connected to the back end only.
Yeah, it sounds like a very, very elegant architecture. And in terms of the database itself, you mentioned, so did you start off with Postgres first, or did you go straight into, I'm assuming, Timescale DB is the provider for Postgres, right?
Well, we started the project to like just about every project starts, right? Spin up a copy of either MySQL or Postgres using Docker, and off you go with now, starting to write some PHP code or JavaScript code for the front end, right? But life of the product started as a JV with another company that was already providing services in the water industry. And, long cut short, that other company was perhaps a lot more focused on cost consciousness than we were, in the sense of wanting to have the answers to the scale question before we needed to. And so that original product ended up being bought by the previous partner of the VC and rebranded. And we as a company continued on to then build version 2. And as I said at the start, we wanted to start how we wanted to finish, and that's how we ended up reaching out to you guys. So the life of the product started as a Postgres instance to be able to start then building the logic of the front end and back end. But the Postgres instance on its own is not going to cope with, the kind of data that I was talking about a little bit earlier, 7+ trillion rows, in having that, being able to scale and provide not only the ability to ingest those 10 million meters worth of sensor data on a daily basis, but also to, at the same time, provides the outcome of, as I said, my early mother seeing her water usage on Monday last week without having to send a telegram to somebody and wait for the response, if that makes sense.
So that seven to 10 trillion rows of data, that just like my mind cannot even visualize it. How much of the storage space is that at? Like, is this, we're talking about petabytes, or are we still talking about compressed data?
It's a very good question, and I did go through this process some time ago with Sarun. What was very interesting in terms of what I'd measured it to be as an outcome, which now going back to 2 years, and it was in might have large petabytes, but because of the compression algorithms that SingleStore's using, we're seeing about 85% compression on that, so saving a whole bunch of storage cost as well. So, as you look at it as raw data, yes, you can sort of see, an amazing size, but 85% compression, it looks a lot less scary, if that makes sense. In terms of amount of data you're moving around. So, yes, does that sort of help you
Yeah,
understand a
yeah,
little bit more?
that makes sense. And going back to, I think, how important this app or company has become, I was thinking about it after I spoke to you last time. So water is precious everywhere. But since your application has been, helping a bunch of different entities and companies, do you have some sort of a number for how much water you have saved from leakage or just getting wasted, and how much people have taken advantage of by saving on their water bills as well?
So, yes, version 2 of the product's been running close to 12 months now, and it's been running a couple of pilots that I've completed successfully with Australian councils. We are in the process right now of building some case studies with Amazon. So councils are signing NDAs to do this. And unfortunately, I can't put council names up on the page because of timing or how we ended up doing this interview. But basically, we're estimating over $1 million of water saved over the 12 months. Because what we're finding is, first of all, a couple of things, right? The typical commercial customer for FLOWD is a customer that has a water bill of $3,000 or more a year. If you think about food processing places, you think about, car washes, you think about, essentially national parks and, public toilets and places where essentially there's a high consumption of water typically, and also places that are not easy to monitor. And we're finding virtually a leak in every one of these places, whether it's a leak found on initial installation, meaning I did not know that I had a leak. It's a small recurring leak that basically I attributed to as the person managing this particular cost in this building as increases of water charges over the years, etc. So an example of that is one of the resorts we manage. The people that manage that resort are one of the investors in FLOWD, one of the partners, the fellow that owns Aspire Property Management. That resort had over the years gone from about a $30,000 a year water bill to about $42,000. Because of this gradual climb over the years, everything gets more expensive over time. So, and because of no visibility to your water usage over your 24 hours and ultimately over your 15-minute intervals, it was, pretty much taken as cost of everything's going up, so the cost of water's going up. And we installed a device on the main meter into that resort, and immediately we see that that device is registering water 24/7. Now, admittedly, a resort or a hotel, you've got people in rooms and they may be using water at different times, and depending on your occupancy, how busy it is in terms of using your water. But when you see a steady amount of water being used over those 15-minute intervals, then it's not people doing that typically. It's a process of water being lost through the network. After further investigation, we find that the auto top-up valve for the swimming pool was faulted. And because that valve continued to fill the pool, and the swimming pool for the resort would then overflow into what is storm water, it wasn't a visible leak in any way, shape or form. And as a result, about $7,000 worth of water a year was being wasted.
Wow.
So immediately, the product provided an amazing ROI for that particular resort, because we're selling the product around $15 Australian a month plus GST in terms of access. And if you then do the numbers, $100 a year or $130 a year against $7,000 savings through fixing that auto top-up valve. And that's just an example, right? I think the biggest leak in 3 years that I've been involved in this business is a leak at a national park for one of those said councils that is now an actual official customer of FLOWD after tipping over the trial period into a commercial relationship, where the water usage calculated over that bill shock period of 90 days would have equated to about 330,000 Australian dollars wasted through the water running into the ground.
Wow.
And it just sandy substrate type ground that causes essentially water to dissipate and not necessarily become visible as a sinkhole type situation. In other words, you wouldn't have known about it until you saw the sinkhole or until you got the massive bill, months after the fact. And we picked that up as it was starting. The council did. Within 5 or so days, they found where in this national park that leak was, using sound equipment, specific equipment to go looking for leaks underground, and discovered a 50 mil pipe that had a hole in it that had grown over time through the pressure of the water leaking out and causing the soil itself and the sandy soil to sort of act as sandpaper on the brass, and actually where the hole bigger and bigger over time. So these are some of the things that I'm happy to share on the screen and show you, Madhukar, if this is
I'd love
fun.
to. If there are things you could show, it'll be phenomenal.
So here's an example. I've given this a name that doesn't equate to the real location because, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, these councils are now in a process of becoming case studies with Amazon Web Services help, and we're going through that, signing off from non-disclosure, etc. So this is not the exact location, but it is a real chart with real water usage. And to give you an idea, over the 15-minute intervals, what we were seeing is about 700 litres per minute of water escaping into the ground in this national park. And Chris, the fellow on the council side who is responsible for that particular area, had to spend quite a bit of time with the specialist leak detection company to then follow the pipe work underground to try and detect where the pipe breakage may be, because it wasn't a visible issue or a visible it wasn't visible as a situation to then detect where the problem was. And if I can, what I'll do as well is share with you what a $300,000 a quarter leak would look like from a 50 mil pipe. And what you can see here is the pipe that the council themselves took a photo of and shared with me after the fact to show that the hole that was worn on the side was what was driving this kind of usage. And you can imagine, right? It's not the full pipe cut off, right? It's actually a hole on the side of the pipe. So it was just going to get worse before it got better, basically, right? It was never going to sort of sit steady. It was just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. But if going back to that image of that dashboard showing the leak, I just want to point out that this council around December and Christmas time, end of year, people spending time with family, these guys are seeing this mountain grow. They jumped into action. So where everybody else was on holidays, these guys are now traveling up and down this national park, following pipes on the ground, looking for where the problem is. And then you can see the magnitude of the change once they found it. So all kudos to this council in terms of their commitment to, delivering conservation outcomes and ultimately to delivering for themselves a outcome of saving on money as well as the conservation side of water. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
And
Thank you for.
and since you're the marketing guy, I'll give you another little line that I decided to, money talks, right? That's another saying in Australia. And you end up with a situation of things being equated to money. But this council has a real focus on conservation and the environment. And when you understand that the kind of water usage that we avoided over a quarter, over that period of a bill, a 2 litres of water a day per human, it equates to keeping 5 humans alive for 18,500 years. Because this is potable water. This isn't just salt water, sea water. It's actually water that was processed to be drinkable, and then it was, money was spent on pumping it into the pipework to get it delivered to your home so you could turn the tap on and drink. So, there's that kind of magnitude of savings in terms of equating it to length of time, people could live on from that amount of water, if that sort of makes sense.
This is amazing work. Thank you for doing this. So, Marc, we are now at the last part of the show where I ask a couple of rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And then we, of course, will finish the recording and upload it online. If you were to start over building this application today, how would you do things differently?
That's a damn good question. Every time I start something, it's always very different. Look, there's been an evolution of better front-end framework packages that I would probably have instituted rather than sort of scaffold a lot of it myself in how it was built and designed. So I would probably be looking at using front-end package like Nuxt, implementing TypeScript, which is a much better version or a more strict version of a language to be used in programming than JavaScript, which is very sort of open and flexible in terms of typecasting, for example. And look, at this stage, I will tell you the one thing that I wouldn't change is what I did in the back end, both from a database side and ultimately from Laravel side. So those two would remain the same. the front end would be what I would do differently, or I would build using different scaffolding.
What is the most common app you use every day yourself personally?
All right, so we should now contact some of these people and ask for some royalties on their free advertising. But look, I love PHP Store, so I've been using that for a number of years. Actually, I've been using that for about 15 years. Those guys have been getting money from me every year in my team. So congratulations to those guys. They've done a great job. And look, there's the odds and sods tools on the front end. Like, I'll give you an example. In my team, I've got a bunch of guys that are, hardened programmers from many years of study and ultimately working in the industry. And I'm really sorry about this noise, guys. You're going to have to cut this out. But amazingly, and believe it or not, this is meters sending data to FLOWD that Slack is reporting to me we're receiving data. If I stop hearing that, I get nervous, right? But I'm really sorry, guys. You might have to cut that noise out. But that was FLOWD essentially sending data. And one of the things that I've always found incredibly useful in every job that I've ever been involved in, whether it's even application development, has been Excel, right? So when you're looking at creating seat data, for example, and looking to create a relationship between data, mapping it all in Excel, and then creating the linkage between the data in Excel so that you can easily extract and put into a migration so I have to say Excel is one of my favorite tools.
So you answered two questions. You answered the most commonly used tool as well as what's your favorite tool as well. Last question, if people wanted to find out more about you or FLOWD, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Look, we've got a website at flowd.com.au where you can come and find some information about contacting us. We are about to do a whole bunch of work right now on marketing as a result of Amazon Web Services selecting FLOWD, I guess, as a water partner tool to work with. So we just finished WAR, so well-architected review and foundational technical review, and now we're engaging with the Amazon Web Services sales team in public sector as well as commercial now to go take the product and show it to some of the councils and ultimately large commercial customers they work with. So you're about to see all of that change. But the website, obviously, the URL remains the same, and the contact details are in there. That's probably the easiest way for people to find us.
So just to confirm, that website URL is FLOWD?
Yes, .com.au. And that is the challenge with a funky brand. You sometimes have to spell it. Otherwise, people will never find you. We can blame this one on one of the partners. It wasn't me. But the name, it's, FLOWD, as in without the E, which kind of makes it a little bit funky, but ultimately definitely something that you need to see spelled.
I can imagine that domain would have been very expensive and not available too. But thank you so much for this conversation, Marc. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I've learned a lot myself. And thanks for coming to the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you very much to you and your team for the good work you've done and you continue to do, and the fact that you keep answering when I reach out, and the guys keep stepping in and helping. So really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We love our customers. Thanks again for doing this.